Nigeria confirms its first case of coronavirus. Graft at Lagos Seaport to be investigated by House of Representatives. On the international scene, as Italy deals with major challenges in the coronavirus outbreak there, its economy is taking a beating. And in sports, slain Remo Stars footballer Kazim Tiamiyu laid to rest.
This is ANN News.
I am Lucy Adeyemi. It was only yesterday Lagos State health officials declared no coronavirus case in the state as a suspected patient tested negative. Well, what a difference a day makes. The federal government has confirmed the country's first case of the virus in Lagos. The government said in a statement this morning the patient is an Italian citizen who works here. He had returned to Lagos from Milan on Tuesday. The statement says the virology laboratory of the Lagos University Teaching Hospital had identified him with the virus. The lab had also said the patient is, quote, clinically stable with no serious symptoms, end quote. It also says the patient is being managed at the Infectious Diseases Hospital in Lagos. The government says efforts are ongoing to ensure quick containment and control of the outbreak. Just on Thursday, the Senate was accusing the federal government of not doing enough to prevent the coronavirus from entering the country. Deputy Leader Ajayi Boroface had pointed to what he called, quote, the very loose arrangement at the Nigerian airport when he returned from South Africa. He called on the government to do more in the area of screening of visitors entering the nation. Senate President Ahmed Lawan said many countries with even better medical facilities were doing so much more to prevent the disease, while Nigeria, quote, was busy doing nothing. Well, in the midst of the coronavirus bad news, there is something the country can cheer. Its economy performed well in 2019 when the gross domestic product GDP grew by 2.5% in the fourth quarter of last year. Data reported by the National Bureau of Statistics say this surpassed International Monetary Fund projections of 2%. Deji Badmos has the figures.
A number of analysts had prepared for the worst when the IMF cut down its growth forecast for the country back in January last year. But contrary to that forecast, Nigeria Statistics Bureau now put the growth rate at 2.27%, propelled by a GDP growth rate of 2.55% in the last quarter of 2019, the highest since the recession in 2016.
In the last quarter of the year, we see a heightened level of economic activities. We also see a lot of diaspora remittances and people coming home with foreign currency, spending more money than you would normally spend. So you normally see a lot more economic activity in the last quarter of the year. And also the last quarter of the year coincide with the peak of the harvest season, which also shows that agricultural performance, if the weather was good that year, it's always higher in the last quarter of the year. So I expected a higher GDP figure in Q4 2019. I may not have expected as high as 2.55%.
In the last quarter of 2019, the oil sector recorded an average daily oil production of 2 million barrels per day, indicating an increase of 0.09 million barrels per day over the daily average production of 1.91 million barrels per day recorded in the same quarter of 2018. This means oil production remained consistently at above 2 million barrels per day all through 2019, driving up the real growth of the oil sector. Despite the seeming positive growth rate, Nigeria's economy is still struggling. Budget deficit is still worryingly high, and debt levels are going up.
You have high inflation rates. You're dealing with unstable crude oil prices, and then you have weak external reserve, which is depleting. They actually worry that you could actually have a reverse capital flow. And should those things happen in 2020, it is not impossible that we end up with a figure that mirrors the IMF prediction.
As cheering as the 2019 GDP figures might seem for Nigeria, They also show the economy is still heavily reliant on crude oil, something the government would not be too happy about. It's an indication it needs to more than double its efforts at diversifying the economy and get the country's non-oil sector to begin to perform to its potentials. Besides, with a population growing at an estimated 3%, any growth rate less than that is in reality not a cause for celebration. So the managers of this economy still have their work cut out.
Members of the House of Representatives are taking seriously allegations that truck drivers have been extorted by terminal security operatives. The lawmakers said they believe the alleged extortion is responsible for the interminable gridlock and traffic challenges at the ports. They said the alleged extortion was responsible for traffic challenges caused by delayed movement of truck drivers who refused to give grafts. A lawmaker from Ekiti State, Olushola Fatoba, moved a motion at plenary to investigate the alleged activities at the port. He said truck operators allegedly pay as high as 300,000 naira to gain access into the port. He also said a team of law enforcement agents, these includes the Nigeria Police Force, Lagos State Traffic Management Agency LASMA, and others who were assigned to maintain law and order and control vehicular movement in and out of the port, have now performed a cartel to extort money from each truck operator before gaining access into the port to load or to offload containers. The lawmaker said this has been going on for years. Fatoba said a truck may spend up to 2 months before gaining access into the terminal. As a result of these activities, he said this causes serious hardships and a huge increase in the cost of doing business. The House has mandated the Works and Housing Committee to investigate the matter and return with a report within 4 weeks. Immediate past governor of Lagos State, Akinwumi Ambode, would have to cooperate in the investigation of him being carried out by the Lagos State House of Assembly. Ambode had opposed investigations into his procurement of more than 800 buses for public transportation. Ambode had filed a lawsuit to stop the probe, and the court had directed parties to maintain status quo pending the court's decision. Justice Yetunde Adesoya of the Ikeja High Court has now given the Lagos State House of Assembly approval to continue the probe. The judge said in her ruling that the court would not stop the Lagos House of Assembly from carrying out its constitutional function of oversight. She then struck out the former governor's suit. Ambode has immediately filed an appeal asking the court to set aside the decision of the trial court and grant his appeal.
Coming up, African stories. Food security in Eastern Africa in jeopardy as massive locust swarms invade the region. And later, international news. Italy's economy takes a pounding as coronavirus bears down on the country.
Welcome back. This is ENM News. Now to African stories. The danger current massive locust invasions have posed to the East African region is tremendous, especially as agricultural produce is in serious jeopardy of destruction by the insects. The region is crying out to the world to help as food insecurity looms in the region. Giri Chala reports.
Deep in the southern Ethiopia, bordering Oromia and Sidama regional states, the desert locust invasion is real and heavy. Similar locust invasion is alarmingly affecting the agriculture sector of countries of the Horn. Due to this, the African Union now says at least 32 million people could be food insecure.
The situation is quite alarming. Already in the Horn of Africa, about 12 million people have been at threat of food insecurity. Now, with the threat of the locusts, the estimates are that an additional 20 million people are likely to be affected by food insecurity as a result of the damage caused by the locusts, which means about 32 million people in the Eastern Africa region are likely to suffer food insecurity as a result of the invasion of the locusts.
The current locust invasion has already led nations like Somalia to declare emergency, and still Ethiopia, Kenya, South Sudan and others are striving to mitigate the effects of the locusts. The African Union advised more quicker and robust works to be done.
First of all, our member states in the region, basically Ethiopia, Somalia, Kenya, South Sudan, Uganda, and possibly Sudan if the locusts move there. Our member states have the primary responsibility to control or mitigate against the impact of the locusts, and we call upon our member states to basically take every measure that is needed. And in this case, it is basically aerial and ground spraying of the locusts. So we are calling upon them to mobilize resources domestically to ensure that they hire aeroplanes to spray against the locusts in the air, but also mobilize the populations, especially in the communities that are affected, to do ground spraying.
Still, people in some countries are using traditional methods of chasing the locusts away, using smokes and release higher volumes of sound. The African Union wants global organizations like the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization to continue their help.
The FAO has estimated that to control the locusts, we need about $70 million US. And the organization has mobilized about 14 million, and there is a shortage of $56 million. So we need the FAO to intensify efforts to mobilize more resources, but also we as the African Union Commission plan to mobilize through our other partners internationally to support the technical organizations in mobilizing resources, both technical and financial, to be able to support our member states in fighting against the invading locusts.
Experts still emphasize the importance of a strong and proactive approach against the locust invasion to be made by the affected countries. And instead of separate works, they suggest a coordinated and synergized work to be done, and sooner.
Kenya has beefed up security in cities, towns, and the country's borders following U.S. warnings of a possible terror attack. The government says security agencies have been deployed and are on high alert. Kenya's Inspector General of Police, Hilary Mutyamba, said on Thursday there is increased border surveillance to ensure criminal elements are stopped from entering the country. The police boss has urged the public to remain vigilant and cooperate with security agencies as they go about their normal activities. The United States Embassy in the country issued an alert on Thursday on the possibility of a terror attack at an unidentified major hotel in Nairobi County. In a short statement posted on its website, the embassy said the targeted hotel is popular with tourists and business travelers. Kenya has been the victim of multiple terror attacks by the Somali terrorist organization Al-Shabaab. The Tunisian parliament has approved the new coalition government headed by Prime Minister-designate Elias Fakhfakh. President Kais Saied appointed Fakhfakh last month to form the government after the Ennahda party's candidate Habib Al-Jamali failed to win parliament's confidence for his cabinet lineup. Reporter Adnan Chouachi has details.
Elias Fakhfakh declared that the state is facing urgent challenges and needs far-reaching reforms in order to revive the economy, boost investment, and improve the social situation.
To restore public confidence in the state, we need to change the government's working method, define priorities, and put an end to the fragmentation of efforts.
The new premier stressed that the fight against crime is a top political priority. He noted that the government will impose a zero-tolerance policy against violence, crime, terrorism, and corruption.
Tunisians are waiting for action, not words, to improve the security situation and dismantle the corruption system. Our response will be clear, swift, firm, and repressive.
The new government has the backing of 4 parliamentary groups and some independent MPs. Another Islamic movement is one of the main allies of the new prime minister.
We have granted confidence to this cabinet because Tunisia can no longer wait or support a period of political turmoil and uncertainty. The situation is now stable for the government to work. the new premier has promised to return to Parliament with a detailed economic program.
The Premier announced his structural project of state reform and decentralization that will allow for the transfer of powers as well as financial and human resources to regional and local authorities.
Elias El-Farfar has expressed confidence in the country's future and urged for unity between Tunisians in order to face unprecedented challenges. The new Prime Minister has the support of the absolute majority at Parliament to implement his structural, economic and social reforms.
When we return, international news. Italy's economy hit hard by coronavirus outbreak, and later sports. Slain Remo Stars footballer Kazim Tiamini laid to rest.
Welcome back. This is ANN News. On the international scene, coronavirus in Italy has slammed an economic toll on the country, and it is being felt in just about every sector. Streets are basically deserted in Milan, Italy's main COVID-19 center, and simple things are no longer simple in the city. Reporter Natalie Carney has the details.
Italy's commercial center, Milan, is feeling the effects of COVID-19. While the government has ordered the lockdown of 11 communities and the cancellation of all schools and public events in 5 northern regions, many big businesses have chosen to implement a work smart policy, telling employees to work from home. Milan is no ghost town, but it has clearly slowed down. The usual bustling main train station is quiet. Public transit is empty. Taxis sit idle. Even Milan's coveted fashion industry has been hit.
We make every year about 90 billion euro turnover.
Carlo Capassa, the president of the Italian Fashion Council, the ones behind Milan Fashion Week, says the virus has affected sales in China and now threatens Italy.
Well, the effect is quite strong because in China, as you know, for many days, most of the department stores, they were, quite the desert, so the business has been dropping dramatically. Now we are afraid that also the retail in Italy could suffer a little bit. Between what Chinese buy in China and what the Chinese customers shop here, it goes around 30%. It's a big market.
Italy's 40 billion euro annual tourism industry is also feeling the pinch.
Milan is clearly not void of tourists, but it's certainly not the number that this city is used to. This fashion capital makes up about 10% of the country's economy, the region Lombardy 20%. But with schools, offices, and the city's main tourist attraction closed, the economic impact is bound to ripple across the country.
Italy's northern regions, and in particular Lombardy and Veneto, where the highest number of confirmed coronavirus cases have been discovered, are among the richest, the most dynamic, and the most export-intensive in a country with one of the largest public debts in the European Union. The Bank of Italy has estimated a 0.2% loss of GDP growth due to COVID-19. Yet the head of the Italy-China Foundation, a non-profit organization supporting the annual 40 billion euro bilateral cooperation, says it's too early to quantify the economic impact.
Up to now, we don't have heavy, consequences on the supply chain because most of the supply has been made before the Chinese New Year. So now we are experiencing everything. It is very hard to say because the situation is still ongoing.
While masks have been sold out for days and hand sanitizer has doubled in price, pictures circulating of panic buying and empty shelves across the city have been exaggerated, at least for now. Residents appear far from panicked, but there is growing anxiety as the number of cases continue to rise across the country.
The United States is taking urgent steps to get a bill through Congress for the funding of the coronavirus outbreak in the country. This is being treated as a bipartisan issue in light of a California victim of the virus who did not travel outside the U.S. and was not in contact with any infected person. American health officials are urging the public not to panic even as they expect more cases. Director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, Dr. Robert Redfield, says the risk is low for the American public. He also said there is an aggressive containment strategy in place that has worked so far. Lawmakers are not sure how much money would actually be sufficient to fight this epidemic. Either the president's $2.5 billion proposal or the Senate Democrats' $8.5 billion. Political differences notwithstanding, lawmakers hope to pass the extra funding bill by mid-March. Democratic House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says the House must work in a bipartisan fashion now and not name call or play politics since lives are at stake. Efforts have been on for decades in the U.S. to get African Americans to break into real estate and to own their homes, but many obstacles have stood in the way to achieving that goal now. A company is doing something to help Black Americans to invest in real estate.
In the U.S., the difference between rich and poor, poverty and wealth, is often home ownership. Too often, African Americans have been left out of that part of the American dream.
This is our real estate company. This house is being sold this weekend.
Harrison Beecher and Keith James are trying to change that one house at a time. Together with another partner, they founded Coalition Properties Group, a rapidly growing firm in Washington, D.C. that helps African Americans buy, sell, and invest in real estate.
And that's what's important as an African American community. The more we can come together and share resources, the better we're going to be.
Many of their clients are based in neighborhoods that have been historically Black, but that are gentrifying rapidly, often leaving African Americans on the sidelines as others profit.
Yes, we are Black. A lot of the wealth in America is controlled by people who are white, but money is green. So how do we educate folks on the rules of money and wealth and how that's connected to real estate?
According to the U.S. Census, last year, nearly 74% of whites owned their homes, while only 44% of African Americans did. Homes in predominantly Black areas were valued at an average of $48,000 less than similar homes in majority white areas. It's part of the reason the average white family has about 10 times the median wealth of a Black family.
Racial wealth inequality is so important in understanding what the future is of quote-unquote race relations.
Diedrich Asante Muhammad is chief of race, wealth, and community at the National Community Reinvestment Coalition, a DC-based nonprofit. He says the homeownership gap has its roots in a long history of racial discrimination in federal, state, and local laws, and a failure to invest in predominantly Black communities.
We haven't done the kind of massive investments in job training, home ownership that was essential to create the white American middle class, which was created through massive investments in the 30s and 40s. That was a time of massive segregation, so Blacks never got that type of investment, and we're still dealing with that issue today.
He wants large-scale government programs aimed at undoing the legacy of racist laws and government policies.
And when you have very little to no wealth, then not much wealth is passed on to the next generation.
Beecher and James also want systemic change, but they know their community can't afford to wait for help from the government.
When they were making the laws of real estate, we weren't at the table. So it's important for us to get a piece of that pie now while we have the opportunity.
They say the more African Americans own property and build wealth, the more political power their community will have.
Still to come, sports. Deceased Remo Stars footballer Kazim Tiamiyu buried. Stay with us.
Welcome back. This is ANN News in Sports. The 12th edition of Nigeria Police Games kicks off today in Awka, Anambra State. Police Public Relations Officer Frank Mba says more than 30 sports will be held. He also said this event would prepare police athletes for the forthcoming National Sports Festival in Benin. 12 zones of 3 states each will compete at the Games. Zone 2 has just Lagos and Ogun, and Calabar Zone 6 has 4 states. The nation's number 2 citizen, Vice President Yemi Oshibajo, is a special guest of honor at the Games. Family and friends of slain Remo Stars footballer Kazim Tiamiyu have said their tearful final goodbyes as he was laid to rest in Shagamu, Ogun State on Thursday. He was allegedly killed after being arrested by a police officer. Tiamiyu was assistant captain for Remo Stars Football Club until his death. That is ANN News this evening. Thank you for joining us. For details on these and other breaking stories, visit our website, annafrica.news. Conversation continues on our social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at ANN Africa TV. I'm Lucy Ademi. Enjoy your weekend.